Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this inaugural episode of Reality Check, a new program here on News Nation that's going to dig into the issues that you and I care about. One of those issues, of course, is the subject of unidentified anomalous phenomena, UAPs. And by golly, what a week it has been to kick off a new show like this. Of all the ridiculous piles of steaming dog turd I've ever seen served up before the US Congress as a report that supposedly tells the truth about what's really going on inside the national security world, the Arrow Historical Review of UAPs was a big pile of steaming BS. I don't know whether I'm allowed to get away with that kind of language on News Nation, but we'll give it a go and see if they get this through the edit. And the reason I care about the UAP issue more than most is because at the heart of the unidentified anomalous phenomena mystery is the question as to whether or not the United States government is misleading the American public and indeed the rest of the world on the truth of what's really going on. As you know, in June last year, I did an exclusive story for News Nation revealing the account of David Grush, a former senior, very senior intelligence officer with the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency and the National Reconnaissance Organization. And he revealed to me exclusively on television the shocking revelation that we are not alone. For the first time, an intelligence insider revealed the existence of a non-human intelligence engaging with this planet. He also acknowledged that it was true that the United States government has been involved in what are referred to euphemistically as crash retrievals, and that there is a retrieval program ongoing of non-human technology. There's also a reverse engineering program, a program underway inside the US government and private aerospace that is one of the highest kept secrets in the US government. It's a program to attempt to back engineer recovered exotic non-human technology. Now, even before I met David Grush, I knew this was true. The reason I met David Grush was because I heard about him from people inside the legacy program. And believe me, ladies and gentlemen, these are good people. They're patriots. They're not people trying to compromise national security secrets that should continue to be protected. They want the United States and my country, Australia, to continue to flourish as democracies. They love the idea of protecting our democratic freedoms, the constitutional ideas enshrined in your constitution. And what they're appalled about is that there has been an egregious failure that has gone on now for decades inside the national security establishment, which has concealed the existence of a legacy retrieval and reverse engineering program. Now, I know that sounds utterly absurd, and there will be the debunkers and the trolls who suggest that this is all a delusion. But as you'll hear today from a direct first-hand witness to the existence of that retrieval program, there is direct evidence, and it's just the beginning. There's going to be a long, slow rollout of witnesses and evidence put before the Congress. Now, it's not that Congress is dragging the chain, by the way. I'm very happy to tell you that I was in Washington, D.C. just a couple of weeks ago. I was strolling the halls of Congress and talking to defense and intelligence insiders, people who care about you, the public, getting the truth about what's really going on. And I was stopped on occasion by congressional representatives and indeed two senators, none of whom are actually prominent in the coverage, the news coverage that's been reported to date about the UAP issue. They were thrilled to see me. They knew me from the Grush interview, and they wanted me to know they care about this issue. They wanted me to know that there is a bipartisan support to get to the truth of the issue of this UAP mystery, not least because they recognise that it's a threat to the constitutional freedoms, the democratic ideas that I love about America. And the irony is, it's going to backfire terribly on the Defence Department and the intelligence community. Because as you will hear today, what has been done in the presentation of that report to Congress is a flagrant breach of an extremely important executive order made by President Reagan, Executive Order 12333. This executive order, among other things, forbids the use by the intelligence community of any covert action influence campaign on either the media or public opinion. And now we've caught them red-handed, or so our interview today will allege. Attorney Daniel Sheehan, he signed an NDA with Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, but he's made the decision over the weekend to speak publicly about what he knows because he is genuinely appalled at the fraudulent lies and misrepresentation that have been presented to the Congress by Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick. And believe me, this is just the beginning. I actually had a conversation with somebody on the weekend who's aware of the Legacy program. And they laughed when I expressed my indignation about the fact that there were such obvious lies reported in the Arrow report. One of the things that was mentioned in the Arrow report was the fact that as part of their supposed investigation, there were certain named companies that were alleged to be experimenting on alien technology. And there were witnesses that went to Arrow and gave this evidence. Arrow said, quote, Arrow has found no evidence that US companies ever possessed off-world technology. The executives, scientists, and chief technology officers of the companies named by interviewees met with the director of Arrow and denied on the record that they have ever recovered, possessed, or engaged in reverse engineering of extraterrestrial technology. Now, I'm going to call them out, as will others very soon, on that lie. Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin, and others, you are lying. And we know you're lying because we're talking to people inside your organisations who say you're lying. And it may be that you believe you can do what I was told on the weekend by my source is the self-justifying excuse that you give yourself for doing this. And that's because this lie is protected by what's called a waived, unacknowledged special access program, which essentially means the dirtiest secret of all inside the US military-industrial complex. These are the most highly protected secrets in the United States. And these WUSAPs require anyone read into these programs to lie. Now, crucially, I think it's very, very important for you, the viewer, the listener, to realise that just because there is a special access program that protects this national security secret, it doesn't mean that everything being done within it is legally within the oversight and control of the Congress. And that's what we're talking about here. What we're talking about here is an egregious failure by Congress to do its job. For what we are talking about here is not only a constitutional breach, it's a crime against humanity. It's a flagrant deceit on the human race. And it's time it was exposed. Now, that's enough of a rant from me. Let's just say that Reality Check is going to ask some bloody hard questions, and we're going to hold these people's feet to the fire and make them very, very miserable. And as long as News Nation's prepared to let me do it, I'm going to cause as much mischief as possible. So let's go now to our first guest on Reality Check, attorney Daniel Sheehan. So I'd now like to bring on Daniel Sheehan, who is one of America's foremost civil rights attorneys, a man I've known for quite some years. and a person who's got a hugely distinguished career in exposing the dark secrets of the American military industrial complex black world. He was instrumental in helping the Washington Post and other newspapers tell the story of the Pentagon Papers during the Watergate scandal. He was also a very important figure during the Iran-Contra scandal. And more recently, he's been digging into the UAP issue through a new organisation called the New Paradigm Institute. Welcome, Daniel Sheehan. How are you, sir?
Thank you, Ross. Busy and excited.
So look, welcome to this inaugural episode of Reality Check. It's a pleasure to have you on board our first episode. I want to get straight away, Danny, to a story you've told before, but which I think most Americans are completely unaware of. It's a story I love. I wrote about it in my book. And it's a story of how you were retained by Marcia Smith from the Congressional Research Service to do some work for President Jimmy Carter into the UAP issue. And before we get to the issue of what you were asked to do, just explain to me what you were told by Marcia Smith had happened when President Jimmy Carter asked to be briefed on the UAP mystery.
Right. Well, what happened, Ross, is that President Carter was elected like on November 4th of 1976. And right by the 19th of November, even before he'd been sworn in, one of the first things he did is he sent word to have the CIA director come down to Plains, Georgia, to his home and brief him personally at his home about the UFO issue and his potential relationship to any extraterrestrial civilization. It turns out that the CIA director at that time was George H.W. Bush, who was later to become president. But at that time, he had been appointed by the new president, Gerald Ford, who had just taken over from Nixon, having resigned due to the Watergate burglary scandal. And George H.W. Bush refused to give him the information. George Bush told him that as the elected president, he had no reason to know this information. He said that if, in fact, Carter was willing to keep him on as his CIA director so that he could become permanently the CIA director, that he might be willing to tell him about this. But President Carter did not. And so what President Carter did is instead he contacted the Congress and said, look, the Congress needs to be involved in this. And he asked the Science and Technology Committee of the House of Representatives to contact the Congressional Research Service and to have them produce two major reports for the president. One on the probabilities and likelihood of there being an extraterrestrial civilization. And secondly, whether it might be responsible for at least some of these sightings of the UFOs. And I was contacted by Marcia Smith, who was the director of the Congressional Research Service Science and Technology Division, and asked to become special counsel to that investigation because I was at the Jesuit National Headquarters. I was their general counsel in their social ministry office, which was their public policy office.
So can I just take you then very quickly to what happened? I'm going to tell this in a rough, quick form. As I understood it, you insisted on being given access to the hitherto secret unreleased Project Blue Book files. And incredibly, they agreed to do that. You were given access because this was a presidential fiat. And as a result of that, and I took great pleasure the other day, I was walking back from a bar near Congress, and I stood at the Madison building, the very same building where you were given entry before it was even officially opened. Tell me what happened that day when you went to the Madison building in the National Archives. What happened?
Well, what happened is Marcia Smith had told me that I had to bring two forms of official photo ID. So I brought my Washington, D.C. driver's license and I brought my passport. And I came to the building. I was surprised that nobody had even occupied the building yet. It was brand new. It had just gotten built. And there were these two suits standing outside of the door waiting for me. They demanded to see both forms of my identification, and I showed them both, and then they showed me in. So I went into the hallway, and they said, go down the hallway to the right, and you'll see an elevator there on the left. And you go down into the basement, and you'll see the place to go. So I went in, I got in the elevator, and I went down. And as I was going down the elevator, on instinct, I just opened up my briefcase and took out a yellow pad and slipped it under my arm, and then closed my briefcase. The elevator arrived in the basement. I got out, and it was dark down there. There weren't lights on, but I could see down the hall. I could see a light coming out of a room, and there were these two other suits, these guys, big kind of husky-looking guys that were there. So I go down the hallway. They both of them demanded to see my two forms of identification. It was sort of like they resented my even being there. But I showed them, and they said, look, leave that briefcase here. You can't take any notes. You can't record anything. But here the stuff is. They brought the stuff for you. And so I put the briefcase down. Yes.
So I just want to set the scene for this. This is you, Daniel Sheehan, being given access to the darkest, deepest secrets in the American military-industrial complex. You've asked for and been given access to the UFO files, the secret files of Project Blue Book, the files the government denies exists. What did you find?
Well, what I did is I walked in, and I was in this a comparatively small room. It was about maybe 20 feet wide and about 12 feet or so deep. And there were these three big cardboard fold-out tables. And they had like shoeboxes, these little light green, kind of government green shoeboxes with the little ties on them. And there was a microfiche machine that was there. And so I sat down, and I took the yellow pad out, and I slid it over behind one of the boxes so that if they looked in, they wouldn't see it. And I opened up the first box, and they had these little film canisters of microfiche film. So I took the first one out, and I put it into this old-timey microfiche machine and started cranking it and looking at it. It was all these documents. And I said, I don't know how long they're going to allow me to stay in here. And so I said, if I start reading each one of these documents as a lawyer, it's going to take forever. So I sort of cranked through them to see if there were any photographs anywhere. Nothing was there in the first canister. And so I folded it all up and put it back in. And I opened up a second canister, went through it, and they had a lot of documents again. I could see all the official stamps on them and the top secret designations, et cetera. And then I got to the third canister, I think it was, and partway in, there it was. Here was this series of photographs, black and white photographs of a crashed flying saucer. There wasn't any doubt about what it was. It was a winter scene. There was snow on the ground, and the saucer, it was a classic large disc saucer, about 40, 50 feet across, with a big dome on the top of it. And it had hit into this snow-covered field, and it plowed this big ditch all the way across the field, like the earth was all turned up, and it was stuck into the side of this big snow-covered embankment, stuck in there like at a 45-degree angle, just stuck in the side of the hill. And I could see all around it, there were these Air Force personnel. They were in winter jackets, with the big fur around the hood, and they were taking photographs of it. And I actually saw one of the guys in one of the photos. There were like three of them that I saw the photos, and they had one of these old-timey cameras, a movie camera, like with the two big round canisters on the top of them. So it must have been like in like the late 40s or early 50s or something, I figured. And so that and then all of a sudden I realized that in one of the photos I could see around the bottom of the dome of the crash saucer that was stuck in the embankment, these symbols. And I looked at them and I said, wow, look at those. There's nothing like anything I've ever seen. They're not Russian. They're not Chinese. They're not, hieroglyphics. They're totally unique. So I said, okay, I'm going to trace these, because I want to make sure they're absolutely identical to what is there, and that they're in the exact sequence that they're in. And so I did is I took out the yellow.
These are top secret files, Danny. Isn't that an act of espionage?
Well, no, I'd been cleared to see them. And so what I did is I took out the yellow pad, and interestingly enough, it's just one of those instinctive things. I opened up the yellow pad to the inside cardboard backing. And what I did is I pushed the backing underneath the microfiche machine, and then focused the microfiche right onto the inside cover of the yellow pad, so that I traced them identically, absolutely, totally accurately, every single one of them. And there must have been about 8 or 10 of them that were all obvious. So I traced them in detail, and I got them all done. I kept looking up to see if anybody was watching. And so I got all done, and I closed the yellow pad, and I said, "That's it. I got it. That's a UFO, man. And look, it's got all these unique symbols on them. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the stuff away. I put the little microfiche away, put it back in the box, took the yellow pad, stood up, and put it under my arm. I have my suit on, and I didn't put it inside my suit to try to hide it. I just stuck it under my arm, and I turned around and got up and walked out. I walked right straight out the door, and the two guys were kind of surprised. And I'm surprised and I think about it that I left as soon as I did, but I had the information, and I said, I don't want to take any chances at all. So I left. I went out the door, and I reached down and picked up my briefcase that was sitting there by the side, and I started walking down the hall. And all of a sudden, one of the guys said, "Hold it. Hey, hold it." And I stopped, and he said, "What is that you got there?" And I said, "Oh, that's my briefcase. I just picked my briefcase up," which was there. He said, No, under your arm. What's under your arm there? Both of them came over to me and kind of loomed over me. And one of them reached over and yanked the yellow pad away from me, and then ruffled through all the yellow pages. And there was nothing on them, of course. And then he kind of grumpily handed it back to me. And so I put it back under my arm, and just turned around, picked up my briefcase, and started walking down the hall. I hope I wasn't whistling, to try to get, but I went down the hallway and got into the elevator. When I got in the elevator, I opened my briefcase and put the yellow pad in, got up and went up the stairs, and walked right straight out the door, and went back to Jesuit headquarters.
So that is 1976 when that happened?
77. That was the spring of 77. This all happened. He got elected in November 76. On November 19th is when he confronted Bush and was refused the information. This was like early spring of 1977.
So 44 years ago, you got to see what you believe is categorical evidence of a crash retrieval of a non-human craft.
Well, I knew that these symbols were not from anything I'd ever seen on the planet, and I had a fairly extensive history. But as I say, I knew they weren't Chinese, they weren't Russian, they weren't Hindu, they weren't anything that I'd ever seen. I'd seen a significant amount of things. I studied foreign policy at Harvard College under Henry Kissinger. I studied theology and stuff at the Harvard Divinity School. I'd studied different legal texts. I was, in fact, the legal research assistant for Professor Jerome Cohen, who was the head of the International Law Department at Harvard. So I'd done lots of investigation about Chinese history and Chinese law. Nothing. These symbols were like nothing that I'd ever seen anywhere on Earth.
Now, you're very sure it was US Air Force personnel in what presumably sounded like 1940s uniforms standing around what appeared to be a retrieved flying saucer.
Yes, that's right. Because I recognized the winter garb, because I was going to go to the Air Force Academy. So I was pretty familiar with Air Force garb. I said, these are Air Force guys. And these are official Air Force guys, taking photographs and movie footage of this thing. And I knew it immediately when I saw it.
But what's important about this, Danny, is that is, if I'm not mistaken, that is first-hand direct witness evidence from you of a UAP, a flying saucer, a non-human craft. Well,
it was exactly as I said. That I was. There's no doubt that it was a flying saucer. That was absolutely clear, and there wasn't any doubt that it was crashed, and it wasn't any doubt that there were no symbols of anything on Earth that were on it. That much I know.
Why do you think? Why do you think they gave you access? I mean, it's quite extraordinary. I mean, I can't think of any other time in history when anyone from outside of the legacy program has been given access to data, to evidence of the
Well,
existence of such a
I
program?
was surprised. I was surprised. So was Marshall. Well, so was Dr. Marshall Smith. When I asked her, she said, "What kind of information would you like to see?" And I said, I knew immediately. I said, I want to see the classified portions of Project Blue Book. I know that there's over 700 sightings that they were unable totally to rationalize away, and they had rationalized away a lot of sightings that wasn't legitimate. But these 700 of them, they were obviously things that were so highly credible and had so many credible eyewitnesses that there was nothing they could do. So they just logged them in as unable to be identified. And so those are the ones I wanted. And those are the ones that she said, oh, they'll never give you that. They'll never give you that. I said, well, look, if we don't ask, we'll never get them. So please ask them. She said, well, all right, I'll ask them.
Now, listen, I've just got this naive idea that the President of the United States is the Commander-in-Chief. So when he says jump, people jump. I would have thought if President Jimmy Carter ordered the CIA director, even if it was George Herbert Walker Bush, to give information on the UAP issue, I would have thought that he would have jumped to attention and said, yes, sir, no, sir, 3 bags full, sir, and given him all the detail he needs. Am I being very naive here?
Well, I won't comment on whether you're being naive, but I will say this, is that's exactly what I was told had happened. And other presidents have indicated the same thing. And when John Kennedy, I know when I was investigating, I was in F. Lee Bailey's law firm when we were representing James McCord, the former CIA wiretapping specialist in the Watergate burglary. And I was tasked at the office to find out what the guys were doing in the Watergate hotel. What were they doing there? And when I conducted that investigation, one of the things I discovered is that on June 5th of 1963, President Kennedy was actually engaged in the exchange of secret letters with Khrushchev after the Cuban Missile Crisis of October of 1962. And they were actually planning to, both of them, take steps to disassemble the nuclear warheads of their respective nuclear arsenals. And one of the things that President Kennedy wanted to do is he wanted to demonstrate to Khrushchev his good faith, and he wanted to have a combined space program with Russia. So he demanded, Kennedy on June 5th, demanded that he be given copies of all the UFO files. And they realized that he was going to give them to Khrushchev. And so they refused to give them to him. So that's these two specific instances in professional investigative capacities that I had, that I was given direct information about that.
So can I ask this? You were briefed eventually about the report that went to President Carter. Was President Carter given any detail about what you had discovered in the National Archives building that day when you were given access to the classified portion of the Project Blue Book files?
Well, actually, that's one of the peculiar facts about all this, Ross, is that what happened is I was so thunderstruck by what I saw. What I did is I took it back to Jesuit headquarters, and I gave it to Father William J. Davis, who was my Jesuit superior. I was a candidate for the Jesuit priesthood at the time. I showed him what I had, and he just reached down and slid open the drawer of his desk and handed me this little 8.5 by 11 manila clasped envelope. And I opened it up and slid out an 8.5 by 11 black and white glossy photograph of a UFO in flight. There wasn't any doubt about what it was. And I said to Father Davis, I said, where did you get this? And he said, my sister Dodie gave it to me. I said, well, where did Dodie get it? He says, well, Mike, her husband, gave it to her. He is the head air traffic controller at the Seattle airport. And his best friend, who's a pilot, commercial pilot, who flies freight all around the Northwest, took this photograph out of his airplane window. And he didn't want to get in trouble and lose his pilot license. So he took it to his best friend, Mike, and gave him the copy and said, there, okay, I performed my duty. Now you have it. And Mike didn't want to get in trouble. So he took the photograph and gave it to his wife, Dodie, and said, here, bring this to your brother. He's a priest. So that's how I got it.
But what happened with President Jimmy Carter? Did he get told about what you'd found in the archives?
You know, it's one of those bizarre facts about history is that I don't believe he did. As strange as that sounds, And I imagine Marcia Smith is upset at me for it because I didn't stay in there long enough to get a lot of other evidence, which I should have. And I just gave it to Father Davis, and then we moved directly to try to get the National Council of Churches to set up a task force to investigate UFOs and to figure out what the theological implications were. And that's what happened.
So it's your belief that even the president wasn't told about what you discovered, that the report withheld that information, that direct first-hand evidence of what you'd seen in those documents in the Madison building in the National Archives?
Yeah, the two reports that were ultimately issued by the Congressional Research Service to the president, which I saw, were simply abstract things about, here are the statistical probabilities. There's this many planets and this many star systems, and here's Drake's equation. And it was just this really strange, soft kind of thing. But it did conclude, based upon their probability projections, that there were at least from 2 to 6 other highly intelligent, highly technologically developed, but distinctly non-human species in our galaxy. And they said that in the official report to the president, because I saw that.
Wow. Now, I'm fascinated. I want to know, did you, when the opportunity came with the creation of the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, did you go to Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick at the ARROW, the Pentagon's UFO investigation office, as a first-hand direct witness? Did you provide that information to ARROW of what you'd seen?
I did. I absolutely did. I was talking with Chris Mellon about this, and Chris said, look, he's going to contact Sean Kirkpatrick directly and take the position that Sean needs to interview me. And so I got contacted by Dr. Fitzpatrick and asked to go.
Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick said as recently as last Friday in the report that was written to Congress that no direct first-hand evidence with knowledge of a retrieval program was provided to ARROW. What he says in that document, under oath presumably to Congress or under some prescription about telling the truth, what he says to Congress is the complete opposite of what you're telling me now here today.
That's true. That's true. No, he was told personally because he's the one that conducted the interview of me. And I gave him all the exact same.
I don't want to drag you into a defamation case, Danny, but this is a very, very important point. Yeah. There are obligations on officers of the state, people acting under congressional rule legislation. Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick was operating according to law, tasked by statute of Congress to prepare a truthful and accurate report. Now, I'm asking you, did Dr. Kirkpatrick lie when he gave you, did Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick lie when he made the assertion that there was no direct first-hand witness evidence provided to ARROW of a crash retrieval?
I provided him under oath the exact same information that I've given to you. And the question is whether he was taking some weird position that, well, that was a photograph and it wasn't on site, but I didn't lay my hands on the craft. And I could tell from the way the report was written, it was kind of wiggle language of trying to pretend that somehow they had no direct evidence. But from a court of law, as a 50-year practicing attorney from Harvard Law School, I can tell you that is direct admissible firsthand testimony about the fact that there is direct visual photographic evidence of a crash retrieval program directly being undertaken by government officials. And he knows that it existed.
So, sir, I need to get an express statement from you. Yeah. What is your position about the truthfulness of Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick in the evidence he gave last week to Congress?
I think that it was a transparent, willful, conscious lie. Just like Project Blue Book was. Absolutely. And I know that, too. I know that.
You're accusing an officer of the government. You're accusing somebody who's been statutorily tasked by Congress to prepare a report. You're saying that that particular official, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, lied categorically to the Congress?
Yes, he did.
Wow. I mean, that's a very, very grave allegation. You'd be prepared to testify about that to Congress and to a court?
Sure. No, absolutely. And then he would have to try to argue whether he said, what his explanation was, as to why that wasn't, sustainable proof of what was in the photographs.
Danny, you and I both know about an executive order, EO 12333. What is the relevance of this executive order made by President Reagan during his administration? What is the significance of that executive order in relation to the obligations that are imposed on members of the intelligence community? And can I also note for the record, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick is, at the time that he was doing that investigation, an officer of the intelligence community, clearly covered by that executive order.
Yes, the executive order 12333 explicitly prohibits anybody in the intelligence community from engaging in any kind of a covert program to try to influence the political opinion of the American citizenry. That they're prohibited from engaging in things like that there was a thing called public diplomacy, which ironically enough was undertaken during the Reagan-Bush administration. They had a whole program called public diplomacy where they were lying about Iran-Contra and denying that they were providing any weapons to them. And I knew that was a lie. And so I undertook the professional investigation and presented all the evidence to Congress and got a special select committee put together to present the evidence to, and generated huge congressional public hearings about it. The same thing needs to be done here. This is a lie about them insisting that they don't have any such information. For them to just turn around, as they did in the report, Dr. Fitzpatrick or Kirkpatrick, and just say, oh, he doesn't happen to believe any of these witnesses that are firsthand witnesses because somehow they've been duped, by the UFO community. That's a ridiculous position to take, and it's propaganda. It is exactly what, Executive Order 12333 is designed to prohibit, and they're in violation of that.
Is it an enforceable? Is it something that could be taken to court and tested and enforced?
That's one of the interesting things. I've had a set of discussions with a number of law school professors and legal experts on this. One of the things that we're talking about trying to do is put more enforcement language into the UAP Disclosure Act that was passed back in December, because they intentionally, the House members, the Senate, Michael Turner, the head of the House Intelligence Committee, insisted he and the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, were going to refuse to allow the bill to be put on the floor unless the enforcement provisions were taken out. And that's what happened. So that one of the challenges here is that it's difficult to enforce those things. Just like with the Boland Amendment in 1984, Congress passed a law totally prohibiting the Reagan-Bush administration and the Defense Department and the CIA from giving any aid, direct or indirect, to the Contras, because they've been declared by the International Court of Justice to be international outlaws. And the CIA went right ahead and defied it and kept right on going. He said, yeah, what are you going to do? And so what we did is filed a Federal Criminal Racketeering Act complaint against them, and went to William Webster, the head of the FBI. I got Ross Perot, who was on President Reagan's National Security Advisory Team, to bring the complaint directly to Bill Webster. And Bill Webster began investigating it officially. That's how the Iran-Contra scandal broke out. And the same kind of thing happened when I was involved in the Watergate investigation with F. Lee Bailey's firm. We demanded that the Congress set up a special select committee to investigate it.
Now, you've made a public statement now accusing Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick of lying. Has he responded?
Not yet. No.
What would you like to see done with this? I mean, frankly, one of the things that shocks me as somebody who is trained in the law with no legal background like yours, but the thing that shocks me about the military and intelligence community in America is how often these egregious breaches of things like this executive order 12333 just happen and get ignored. Isn't this going to be another case where this executive order banning covert action against the American public is just willfully ignored by the intelligence community?
Yes, unless Congress convenes hearings on this and remedies this with particular pieces of legislation and puts in criminal sanctions for these types of violations. That's why we've organized the New Paradigm Institute, and we're organizing Citizens for Disclosure, trying to set up an action team in every single one of the 435 congressional districts to write to their congresspeople and senators and get them to hold public hearings to know what needs to be remedied.
So let's there be no mistake about this. You see what happened last week with the report that was presented to Congress as a fraud. You think that the public are being lied to, and you have direct first-hand witness evidence that you're prepared to testify about to Congress, which proves that lie.
That's right. Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm perfectly willing to testify to Congress about the first-hand direct photographic evidence that I saw of the crash retrieval of a UFO, which I'm convinced because of the symbols on it, we're not part of any nation state on our planet, and that I told this under oath directly to Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick as an official Arrow investigative hearing, which we pushed on him and got him to take the testimony. And I gave it directly to him. All they had to do was just go check the records.
Now, to your knowledge, were any inquiries made by Arrow as a result of your evidence to Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick? What was his reaction when you gave him the evidence?
He asked me if I could provide to him a copy of the tracings that I had done, and I had said that I didn't have those anymore. You know, that I brought them to Jesuit headquarters. They were in the files of the Jesuit headquarters, and that as far as I knew, that those files, I brought some files with me out to California when I came out here to teach at the University of California, Santa Barbara, and I don't know whether that particular yellow pad was in those Jesuit files or not, but it's that they aren't there.
But he could at least have called as a witness Marcia Smith, who still works, as I understand it, in a private defence institute. She could have been asked and deposed as a witness to see whether or not she was prepared to give evidence to corroborate your claim.
Sure, and of course they could demand to see the records that showed that the Project Blue Book files were brought to Washington, D.C., and 4 different security people were assigned to guard them, you know, and they were brought to the Madison building, and right there in the spring of 1977. There has to be clear records of that.
And look, forgive me for having to challenge you on this, but this isn't some BS story on your part. You're actually saying this happened. You were given access, quite extraordinarily, to direct evidence that the United States government is aware of retrieved, potentially non-human craft, flying saucers.
That's right. That is exactly.
I scratch my head as I think about this because it's quite extraordinary. And I remember when I was writing my book, I was actually blown away by the fact that you'd had this experience. Because as far as I can see, it's unprecedented. Nobody's ever been given access to those secret files before. And as we learned with last week's historical review to Congress, the existence of such files is now categorically denied by Arrow to the Congress. You're saying they're lying.
Well, and I interviewed Albert Stein, a man who worked directly for Project Blue Book, on his deathbed, and he gave me great details about the program and how they had a whole special unit set up that had to look into these 700 cases that they knew perfectly well. They couldn't explain away, and he was directly involved in keeping all the records of that. he called me on his deathbed and asked me to fly to see him up in northern Michigan or Minnesota. I've got my records. And he confessed on his deathbed about the program going on, and that he actually was taken to S4 and saw one of the craft and told him about it.
So, oh, wow, this is interesting. I've never heard this before. So you're saying that you were provided with direct witness evidence of the existence of a facility known as S4 at Groom Lake, Area 51.
That's right, from Albert Stein, who was a guy that worked in Project Blue Book for many years on his deathbed.
Wow. You know, it's funny, Danny. I mean, like you, both of us are talking to people in the legacy reverse engineering and crash retrieval program, the program that the Pentagon denies exists. I guess I feel a sense of futility that when you've got direct first-hand witness evidence like yours, and it's blatantly, willfully ignored by Arrow's investigation and egregiously misrepresented to Congress, what hope is there? I mean, they're just blatantly lying to the executive arm of government.
Yes, and to the congressional branch. That's exactly what they're doing. That is a profound problem of the national security state, Ross. The whole national security state apparatus that was set up by the National Security Act of 1947 over the course of the past 80 years has basically garnered unto itself the authority to lie to Congress, to lie to the president, to lie to the American people, to undertake full-scale propaganda campaigns, to lie to the people of the country. And they got caught doing it. They got caught doing it in the Pentagon Papers. They got caught doing it in Watergate. They got caught doing it in Iran-Contra. And the fact is, there were one set of hearings, the Senator Frank Church Select Committee on Intelligence Abuse hearings, where they exposed a lot of that. And they set up the intelligence committees to try to rein this in. And the fact of the matter is that the intelligence committees are not doing their job. They need to hold public hearings and have the public testimony presented so the American people know what's happening here, and that they need to take further steps to enforce their rules and regulations. I just had a conversation with the president, incoming president of the University of Washington Law School, and she said the way this thing is presently operating, it's just a question of who's got more power, whether the national security state has more power than the constitutional government of our country. That's the situation that we're faced with here, and that's what's being surfaced here in this UFO issue.
I think the thing that's extraordinarily significant about what you're telling me, Danny, is a lot of the time I get very frustrated because I can't name the people that I'm speaking to who are still in the program. Obviously, David Grush had considerable courage in coming forward, but I'd been speaking for a while to people working in the legacy program, actually working on recovered non-human technology. And they were telling me this is real. What I find extraordinarily important and special about what you're telling me today is that you actually do have first-hand witness evidence of the existence of the retrieval program, and you provided it to Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick directly, not to one of his flunkies. You provided it directly to him, and yet he has presided over a report which you say is committing a fraud on the American public. It is lying to the American public about the truth of UAPs, crash retrievals, and a reverse engineering program.
Absolutely right. That's exactly what's happening here.
So what can people do about this? I feel a sense of futility. I know the New Paradigm Institute's got this Citizens for Disclosure initiative. What are you hoping to achieve through Citizens for Disclosure?
What we're going to do, Ross, is we're going to set up these action teams in each of the 435 congressional districts and also in each of the 50 states. And we're going to have these people contacting their congresspeople and senators to put wind under their wings, because a vast majority of the United States senators, both Republican and Democratic, want this information transmitted to them. that's being withheld right now.
I'll agree with that, actually. I mean, as you know, I was in Washington a couple of weeks ago and I was privileged to be able to walk the halls of Congress. I actually had senators on one occasion grabbing me and saying, "You're that guy that did the Grush interview. Great work. Really want you to know we're in on this. We're really committed." And interestingly, these aren't senators who are publicly known to be expressing support for the UAP issue. These are people who quietly, behind the scenes, are now supporting a bipartisan push for disclosure.
That's right. And one of them is Chuck Schumer, who is the majority leader of the Senate. And in fact, this on March 20th, there's going to be a major rally out in front of his offices in New York City on 47th and 3rd Avenue, cheering him on for the fact that he sponsored the Schumer bill. That's why we need to cheer them on. And it's not that we've got to browbeat them into doing something they don't want to do, but we've got to overcome the resistance of just a tiny handful of some of the key chairpersons, who are, basically in the pocket of the private aerospace industry.
Danny, I want to wind up here with you, but what I want to come to is the constitutional seriousness of what we're talking about here. This is an executive order 12333 that bans covert action by the intelligence community against the American public with willfully misleading media campaigns or influence campaigns. On your direct evidence, you're telling me that executive order is being breached. And moreover, probably more importantly, Congress is being lied to.
That's right.
What is the constitutional significance? You're a constitutional lawyer. You tell me, what's the constitutional significance of what we're talking about here?
This is an absolute violation of the separation of powers. Which is a major principle of our United States Constitution. Under Article 1 of the Constitution, our United States Congress has the authority for setting rules and regulations governing the activity of our United States military and our intelligence agencies. And so therefore, the Congress has the authority to pass these rules and laws, and they have the authority to pass additional statutes imposing punishment for their violation. We have to get them to have the political courage to do that, not just to mouth these platitudes about how they shouldn't be doing this, or even issuing their own executive orders telling their people not to do it and then doing nothing about it when they violate it. That we need to have the Congress of the United States stand up and assert its constitutional obligation of representing us. That there are United States Supreme Court cases that say that the president does not have the authority to be doing these things in defiance of Congress. And Congress has been telling them over and over again that they have to stop doing this, and they keep doing it. So the Congress has to step forward and put teeth in these orders now, in punishments for the people who violate them. I don't want to have to keep on bringing lawsuit after lawsuit like we did in the Iran-Contra case, to try to enforce the Federal Criminal Racketeering Act against these people. So that's what we need to do right now. So we're calling for those public hearings. We have people all across the country that are writing letters and sending in communications to their congresspeople and senators. We have a site at newparadigminstitute.org. All the people have to do is go there and put in their zip code, and it'll tell them exactly who their senators are and their congresspeople person is, and it'll send a message to them, giving them their support for holding these public hearings. And you and I know that there are up to 40 people who have direct firsthand information about this program that Sean Kirkpatrick and the Aero Office have lied to the American people about, saying there's no evidence of any kind of there actually being such a program. That is transparently lying to the people and to Congress, because this is a report that's been filed to Congress.
Danny Sheehan, thank you very, very much for that analysis. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. We have a constitutional crisis in America. We have a direct threat to the control by Congress of everything that happens inside the US government. Egregious, flagrant, alleged breaches of the US Constitution. A challenge to the whole notion of separation of powers. Do Americans give a flying hoot. I don't know if they do. But Daniel Sheehan and his colleagues at New Paradigm Institute are going to give it a go. He's getting on the saddle yet again for another confrontation with the national security state. And if you'd like to help him, if you'd like to get behind Citizens for Disclosure, get in touch with the New Paradigm Institute. This is a very well worthwhile and well-deserved support organisation. Give it your support. We need to get to the truth. Daniel Sheehan, thank you so much, sir. I really appreciate you joining this inaugural episode of Reality Check. Thank you so much for your contribution.
Thank you, Ross. It's a privilege.